Well, good morning, friends. I'm gonna call us to order, few though we do be. Or I am the preacher this morning and I can't, at this point in my vocation, bilocate. I am still working on that skill. Thank you for prioritizing and making time available to come to our forum, the first of three, our Faith Forum series on stewardship this year, on our giving practices and the theology thereof, but also in this year, focus on our capital campaign, which happens to also then coincide with our annual pledge drive as well. Just to give you a quick map of the road forward, this Sunday, we'll talk about the first two projects in the campaign, for the capital campaign, a little bit of the why and how we got here. Then next Sunday, we will tackle looking at a second set of projects that are listed in the capital campaign and a recap. For those who have missed or watching this recorded, maybe we'll still recap this next week, just briefly. And then the third week, we'll talk a little bit about the annual pledge drive and what the goals are for that. And we'll also look ahead at the stretch goal of the capital campaign, which has a lot of implication for our annual campaign as well. Come on in, there's plenty of room up here. We saved you seats. We're just starting super on time today because the rector has to preach today, so.
And 94 is closed.
And 94 is closed, so thank you for fighting through and making it. I'm sure you've left some of your frustrations in your car and some have come with you, and that's okay.
Joyful.
Yes.
Glad we're dressed because our power was up.
Oh, my goodness. Well, this requires prayer, and for that, let's see if we can make this work. For this, we'll pray the prayer made for us by our spiritual emphasis committee of the capital campaign. We'll be praying this intermittently as a congregation throughout this process. So I thought today, if you can see the words on the page, can join together in praying this together. The Lord be with you.
And also with you.
Let us pray together. O God, whose love knows no end, and whose dwelling is with the humble and generous of heart, inspire in us a spirit of holy generosity. Free us from the fear that clings to wealth, so that through our giving, opening our hands in trust and joy, we may become repairers of the breach, builders of a house where love can dwell and all are welcome. Make of this campaign more than bricks and mortars, but instead a living sign of your kingdom, where justice is sown, compassion takes root, and your grace flows freely through your people, through Jesus Christ, who with you and the Holy Spirit lives and reigns, one God, now and forever. Amen. Thank you for praying that with us together, and thank you to our spiritual emphasis committee, Dan Vogel and Jax Collins, who helped us create the words for this. Thank you so much. You may have heard echoes in that prayer of this passage of scripture from Isaiah. Your ancient ruins shall be rebuilt. You shall raise up the foundations of many generations. You shall be called repairer of the breach, the restorer of streets to live in. A prophetic word from the prophet Isaiah to a people much in need of it. And as the core team and now the capital campaign committee met and learned about and prayed over the possibility of a capital campaign, it was this passage of scripture that floated to the surface for our consultants as they listened to our wrestling with what to do next. And so the theme of the campaign is in this passage of scripture, that you shall raise up the foundations of many generations. And the complementary idea that we would be repairers of the breach, that through this work we might actually be about healing what is broken in our community beyond these doors and even within us. So as you listen today, I hope you'll hold us to account for this message, this why in our work. Well, let's talk about the background of this capital campaign. So the idea for a capital campaign originated in two forms. Large capital improvements, projects regularly occurring each year or every other year. We'll talk about more about that in our reserve fund. which is the next slide. But funding improvements and repairs often led us to use debt, or in a reactive way instead of a proactive way. We were taking care of things like the parking lot and the replacement of a slate tile roof, or the fixing of the flat roof over this building off of loans and credit in reactive ways when they broke, as opposed to getting out in front of them before they were leaky. The second thing that helped us come to the conclusion that a capital campaign was needed was that the use of our space continues to grow each year, particularly in that's our programs, as well as outside community groups. While we don't generate a lot of revenue from the use of our building by outside groups, we continue to encounter lots of ways that our building limits our ability to serve internal ministry groups and provide hospitable and useful space without space conflicts to our partner organizations like Big Wonder, Artaria, and the House of Prayer in the City, as well as community groups. Think here of the now dozens of theater, music, and 12-step groups and neighborhood association groups that use our space on the regular basis. And there are more each month that come towards us asking if they can somehow do their work here at this place. Those two realizations led us to a listening phase, which helped us listen really carefully, both to our money narratives, the stories we tell ourselves and our history about money and around money at St. John's, our history with fundraising, and it allowed us to gather feedback from partners in our community, as well as to listen closely to each of your individual hopes and dreams for this building and how we might use it into the future. All of that broad listening was gathered into a report that is available on our website, which hopefully you have availed yourself of when it came out and was released. That was before we even undertook a feasibility study. We wanted to gather all of the information we possibly could. Then we undertook a feasibility study, which helped us test out the possibility of raising funds for over $6.7 million worth of projects that we had identified in the listening phase and before it. We did interviews with over 19 households, and over 105 households took our online survey, which is over 54% of our faith community. That was a huge success. You've heard us talk about that when we presented the feasibility study, but we learned a lot. And most importantly, we found out that roughly $3 million of those projects were achievable or feasible because of your interest and this community's ability to fund those projects and to do them. Throughout the process, we paid close attention to the why. We just talked about that with that scripture verse and our prayer, but we talked about our why for this campaign. And at each turn, our capital campaign consultants have asked us to return to these motivating factors: a desire to care for the historic and important building, to support ministry, which in turn shapes the world around us for good, to have fun together and cultivate community and joy, and finally, to shift our money narratives, our relationship to money, and to change how we talk about it and the way we believe about it into one that is more helpful and more faithful. As you may have read in the feasibility study, quote, "Great care must be taken in inviting all kinds of gift sizes. This is a shift in the culture of fundraising and the money narratives of the congregation from previous campaigns. In addition, connecting the why of this campaign to the values of the congregation will be critical. This campaign cannot be done for the sole purpose of raising money, but must be done as a vehicle for change making to enable the congregation to make change both in the lives of congregants, but also the wider community." You can read the whole feasibility study, as I say, on the website. Large support was seen for the category of love. We broke it out into 4 categories, kind of as buckets to hold different projects. Love, as you might recall, was love of this building as a implement and tool for ministry, largely the repair and maintenance and keeping of this building, and the establishment then for a capital reserve fund for future unfunded capital projects. And just behind this first priority, large support was found for projects under the categories of welcome and of community. They were almost identical in buy-in, and so you'll find that we have projects listed here in both of those categories. With the help of architects at OPN and a design team of members, we were able to refine those physical projects into the work that you'll see today and in the coming two forums and in the campaign materials, which will be shared with you if you're not in the advanced gifts phase, in the congregational gifts phase. But you are getting a little bit of a preview, and I hope with the background, you appreciated my use of the TARDIS, taking us back in time.
Oh.
You can applaud later, it's fine. There was one, yay, that was good, that was good. So what was the category of love? Let's start with the why. This priority in the feasibility study, the reserve fund was love. We love this place. We've called it home for now over 120 years of our 140 plus years of existence. Did you know that we've now been around for 140 plus years as a faith community? We, as I said in the outset, we made this a top priority. You made this a top priority because you understood that deferred maintenance up to 6 figures annually or biannually is a large burden to carry, and to do so without proactive planning is to shoulder future generations with this generation's problems and challenges. The reserve study was undertaken in 2019, led by Tom Evans and members of the Property, Building, and Finance Committee. And we enlisted the support of a reserve study firm, which recommended funding a reserve fund starting with $1 million in 2021. We're a little late in starting, but the building is our base of operations for ministry, the house where we gather for worship, spiritual practice, and for action. From our understanding through the feasibility study and resulting conversations, there has been no dissent, disagreement, or quibbling with this goal. It has been universally bought into, but we're open to feedback today, but we'll have questions at the end, and so I'll keep us moving right along because I know many of you are eager for what comes next in the slides. Welcome and community. We're not going to talk about all of these projects today, but these are the projects that through the discernment of the Capital Campaign Committee and the vestry were sifted out of the 2 buckets of projects as feasible in a contiguous whole project that would make sense to do together, knowing that when you touch this wall or that wall, it's important to do things that are related to it and not leave a hole where you could put another new wall. So there are not all 6.7 million worth of projects listed here, and obviously not every project listed under welcome or community is also listed here. These are the projects we did decide on. New accessible bathrooms with increased privacy. If you've ever used the 2 bathrooms directly adjacent to this room, you know that they are both dated and not very private. We will be reconfiguring some of our existing storage, which means for the joyful, I hope all of us, the joy of all of us, means downsizing some of the things we've been hanging on to for a long time and prioritizing the practical use of the spaces adjacent to the storage, primarily underneath us here in the gym storage or the parish hall storage room, which used to be the gym locker rooms. We'll be updating our kitchen into a catering kitchen. I know many of you have questions about that, and we'll be talking about that in a moment. There will be a new lounge space for small to medium-sized groups in what is now known as the pre-function space, or the space between the parish hall gym and the kitchen. That will become a longer lounge space for meetings, but also configurable for prep before service and things like that, for food service and things of that nature. So a multi-purpose space, but better configured for the many small and medium-sized groups who continually ask and request use of space. We'll be creating a brand new community gathering space in the majority of, or a large portion of the existing storage space underneath my feet here. So a new lounge, essentially equivalent to about 2/3 the size of this fireside room, which will allow us to accommodate many of the groups who have been coming towards us, including our own, who need space to gather. Finally, we'll be refreshing and updating this fireside room into its new phase of life together, because it is the most sought after, most used, and honestly, most beautiful historic space we have in the church outside of the worship space itself. So the kitchen. If we heard anything in the feasibility phase, it was that the kitchen itself had a lot of questions on when people took the feasibility survey and a lot of opinions. That's not surprising. Kitchens are beloved spaces in any of our homes, And as a culture, we have often found that kitchen renovation is the number one thing people think of when they get a new home. It's a thing that's near and dear to most of our hearts, especially as a cook. I was really passionate about this project. When we asked folks during the feasibility study to tell us their priority projects that we should include in a capital campaign, we heard two things loud and clear. We're dedicated to doing more to serve our neighbors. And two, we need to be responsible for making sure that we keep the building safe, secure, and functional now and for the future. That is the mandate that the vestry has worked with throughout this process, creating a space that is most welcoming and hospitable to our neighbors as we can make it, given our capacity to raise money right now, and ensuring that our building maintenance is a priority now and for the future. The case statement, which again you will see in full when it comes to your home, or if you're now in the advanced gifts and you're having meetings with our advanced gifts inviters, you may already have a copy of and be looking at. Our case statement shows the wonderful and exciting ways that we are able to achieve these goals by focusing on the spaces that will provide the greatest welcome and the most community to the most people. The upgrades and improvements behind the scenes are less easy to see. It's important to name that up front. Some of the work that must be done to fulfill our building care responsibilities may be less obvious. As a result, some questions have come up, in particular around the kitchen remodel. Believe me, there was a lot of conversation about the kitchen between the planning team, the architects, and even the vestry. Lots of faithful, prayerful conversation has happened. And a note here from the feasibility report, an anonymous quote, upgrading the kitchen should be a priority. The kitchen is not at code and may become dangerous. That was cherry picked by the slide creator. There were many comments about the kitchen. This one suits the point we're trying to emphasize as we look at the case statement, but many points could be made. You won't be able to all see this where you are, but I felt like a visual was important just to give you a reference point. Hopefully we'll have more visuals to show as we go on. But the kitchen that we are looking at doing falls currently within the existing footprint of the kitchen as we know it. There will be an adjacent pre-function space which currently ends here, this being all storage in the current configuration. We are expanding into this to create this longer, useful room for multi-purpose for gatherings because we often find space use conflict. There will be a storage space that is much smaller, and then the adjacent large gathering space over here, which you can't see. We'll talk about that next Sunday. So the kitchen, let's talk about it. Our first obligation with the kitchen is to remediate lurking health dangers like asbestos, a leaky stove that is, when it's turned on, is letting fumes into the air, and when it's used is now a questionable source of heat. If you've read the reports recently, at least up until the current federal administration, about the use of propane and or gas stoves in the home. And code violations that are in and around the space is also needing to be remediated in the walls, the floors, etc. We need to remove old, outdated, and non-functional equipment. We've asked the architect to break down the numbers very granularly so that we can talk about them. But in summary, or basically, a significant portion of the budget reflected in the kitchen costs goes to this necessary work of fixing what is broken, remediating what needs to be remediated. In addition to fixing health and safety issues, this part of the work will also set us up for future improvements that are just too costly for us to include right now with what we tested for as feasible, putting us in a position to do a project in the future that would include essentially full HVAC for that space and ventilation that is necessary to bring it up to code for a professional kitchen and other things like fire suppression. Because we're keeping the same footprint for the kitchen, we're able to focus on upgrading everything else and not eliminating future possibilities for the use of that kitchen. We heard that loud and clear in the feedback to the survey. Please don't hem us in to future needs for that kitchen. So we understand that there may be increased demand for cooking in there, and there even now is desire to start events and have opportunities for cooking in there. And we want to be able to create the possibility for that. And in fact, there will be some cooking possible, as you'll see as we go into the conversation in future phases and now. So what is included in this renovation? Well, very simply, some of those hidden things and lesser noticeable things, flooring, wiring. There will be a hood. It won't be a professional kitchen hood, in other words, up to the ventilating of a full-on professional stove, but a hood nonetheless to vacate any kind of residual fumes from making pancakes, for instance, or from the smells coming after a lovely buffet that we've laid out. There will be sinks, a fridge, new freezer, new dishwasher, microwaves, electric griddles, warming oven, and an electric convection oven and ice maker among the new things that are coming with this space. Which means there will be some cooking with electric griddles. We'll handle all of our needs for pancake supper. We'll be able to, with a convection oven, countertop style, we'll be able to do things like small cooking and reheating things and getting dishes up and going. And with the heating warming oven, we'll be able to hold things at temperature for service so that we don't lose the heat of those items. So as you see, it's not perfect, but it does in fact meet some of the need while also doing the much needed work of abating asbestos tiles and all the other things we've named. So let's talk about the costs. The catering kitchen itself, if you already have looked at materials, you'll see the total cost is listed as $552,825. That breaks out into two adjacent costs, the catering kitchen at $311 and some change, and that pre-function lounge at $241 and some change. Our budget for the kitchen and gathering space is, as I say, $552,825, of which about that $300 is allocated just to the kitchen. And if you break that down even further, $100,000 roughly goes to the mechanical, engineering, and plumbing. So MEP, if you're familiar with architectural terms. About $100,000 for equipment, so counters, storage implements, and appliances. And about $100,000 for space, for floors, walls, ceilings, new surfaces, new finishes, all of those things. If we were to add a professional range and stove, the kitchen contract pricing firm that was subcontracted through our architect priced out the starting fee would be about $42,000 just for the stove. Plus the need for additional HVAC when you upgrade the BTUs you're producing and the fumes that come off of it. You also need to provide enough air into the room that when the hood sucks the air out, you're keeping the volume of air at that level. And so it requires a higher grade of HVAC, not to mention the hood itself that does the evacuation of the air. So if you take in for the additional HVAC, a suppression system, and the hood at the level that would be needed for that kind of stove, the budget would add between $100,000 to $120,000 additional cost just for the equipment. The additional budget funds for about $252,000 is both for asbestos abatement and the construction of that small gathering space. So actually in the pre-function lounge is also folded in some of that abatement cost, which is a separate cost to the campaign. Everything we need to store, assemble, and warm food and serve both our needs and those of who use our facilities for events is included in this remodel. In other words, it will continue to supply us what is currently being done in that kitchen. To spend the extra $100,000 to $120,000 to make on that work, plus equipment itself, would diminish our ability to do the pieces of the capital campaign and the other work throughout the building. And at the end of the day, we decided, both vestry and capital campaign committee, that it would not reflect our commitment to the feasibility study results, your feedback to us, which is to focus our capital campaign on putting our neighbors and the care of this building first. The good news is that the refreshed kitchen with new equipment will be a huge improvement and in the near term. And when we are ready for our next campaign, or should a windfall come in or a specific donor desire to make this happen, we'll have laid the groundwork for the next level of improvements by taking care of the basics first. So now we have time for lots of questions and conversation, which I wanted to leave plenty of time. So things that you've noticed in there, things that you want to ask about. And for this, if you're a capital campaign committee member or have been involved in the leadership, I'll ask you hold your questions because you have entree to the committee and our consultants all the time. And so this is more so for folks who are either in the midst of their advanced gift conversations or folks who are just wanting to be here to prep themselves for when the packet comes in the mail. Questions?
Jared, could you clarify the relationship of the kitchen as it exists right now with the walls as they're placed? And what you're calling a lounge, or I'm not exactly clear about that, but I'd just like to have a clearer picture of how those rooms will relate and how the kitchen will be prepared.
Sure.
I heard that.
Yeah.
So it's easy to slip in what.
Yeah. So
what-
the existing kitchen will remain in the footprint and the walls won't move. The walls for the existing kitchen will stay the same. The only difference will be that at present, we're planning on closing off that serving counter out to the secondary space, in part because we're hoping that this room will get more use as one of our now needed and often demanded extra spaces. So just to give you a quick for instance, on a Saturday morning, there will be, just this Saturday, there will be, or is it next Saturday? One of these weekends, a Saturday, there will be our own Wayfinders course happening in the building. There will be Artaria, which takes over as many free spaces as possible for tutoring of students. There will probably be a 12-step group, and often there will be a theater group, a big wonder group, and a random other ministry that might need to have a committee meeting, like music committee or building committee or property committee. So all of those things are regularly at conflict on our available spaces for the size of groups. So we're hoping to be able to use this as a much more comfortable meeting space. So the one wall that's moving is there was a wall here. That wall is being eliminated and is being opened up. So the new lounge, there will be a secondary, there's this currently the servery or the pre-function space will be a secondary lounge. A larger lounge over here that we'll talk about on next Sunday is being created, and a storage space. So there will be access through double doors that exist now. You've seen them downstairs. You'll come into then a new wall and new double doors for the storage space, a new wall and new double doors for the existing, for the new lounge. That means that entering the space into this servery space will be either through the single door that exists or through the double doors that exist because we'll have eliminated this wall. Does that help explain kind of how they relate?
Yes.
Good. Yeah, Phil.
While we're on this topic, I've had some experience with design and spaces. And I have to say that eliminating that wall from the servery area to make that a long space like that, that's a very difficult space to use for meetings. It's extremely long and narrow. And I think you get more out of it leaving that wall there and having two smaller spaces. Because that's, I mean, it's like a bowling alley. And that's not a useful size or configuration for a meeting space.
So you're not wrong that it's long and narrow and that there are some constraints that come with that. There are also, at this point, it's a blank slate. So there is possibility for an addition of subdividing the room with accordion walls so that it can be expanded and used. Those are things that come in late design. At this moment, we do know that the men's breakfast has faithfully used that space for several decades and enjoys that long, narrow space. Now we'd be lengthening it, but you can imagine actually visually setting up your furniture so that this is much more of like a coming and going space for these other two spaces, and that we still would be lounge sitting on this end, like a long table configuration like we do now for men's breakfast. So there are options still, well noted, and I'll pass that on into our final design, but none of those things are going to dramatically change the cost of that piece of the project at this moment. So other questions? I appreciate those, Phil and Jan. And I'll come back to you, Jan, in a moment. Yeah, Holly, go ahead.
I'm curious whether any thought was given to the other smaller kitchens in the building, because I know they're all, like this one right over here is connected to, a lot of meetings here, and the one down by the Andre Croft we use. They're all used to support meetings, which this one is too. And I'm just wondering whether there was thought given to upgrading or
Sure.
rearranging any of these smaller but much used kitchens.
Yeah, I should probably say this with the recording turned off, but I'll say it anyways. Yes, there was a lot of thought and consideration given to those other spaces. As you know, the one in the Undercroft is a catering space, so it's a microwave, it's a fridge, it's a sink, and a prep space. Probably what we think of in the most basic sense of a catering kitchen, not what we'll be getting, which is a slightly more elaborate version of that. This kitchen was debated extensively in the design phase because this space we had committed to refinishing this space. And there were multiple design options. Ultimately, we decided that as soon as we touched that kitchen, the same code ventilation issues would come into play if we touch that kitchen. And one of the benefits of not touching it is that there is currently, the fire marshal has said nothing about the existing stove that is in there, which means for, say, a Thanksgiving dinner where one turkey wants to be roasted, that can happen. It'll make the whole building smell like turkey because there isn't appropriate ventilation. It's electric, it's not flame. So we thought about it and we tabled it. I think eventually it should be touched. It's a really important space. But I think for right now, as an in-between measure, it was nice to know we'd have one stove still in the building. So sorry, man.
Did you say that we will not have the normal combustion of?
Correct. So the thing
It's
we're
gonna be all electric.
all electric, and we will have no actual stove. So we'll have some griddles or a griddle, a large griddle. Like there's some options available for a very high-end electric griddle that is countertop, or some modular ones that we can move around and use in different spaces. We'll probably have things like induction burners that you can buy as singular burners to warm up things on countertop, which again don't produce flame, they don't produce heat. They just only when they're touching correct pans and pots. A convection oven, again, there are some really nice ones that are larger in size, and then there are some smaller ones that can be done again modularly around the room. So the idea is to keep as much functionality without crossing that line of having an actual stove in the space, which is combustion. And at that combustion level, you have an increased need both for evacuation, that hood, and air in, HVAC. And both of those things are much more dramatic. We're gonna put in a modest one now, but
You're saying with that the size of the ventilation ducting and wiring and everything is adaptable to the increase.
it is, there will be, that part of that cost is running conduitry at a larger scale. So we'll have existing, it won't be as expensive, but essentially it's a whole project of the whole HVAC system and the whole hood system. Currently, if you've ever been down there, our current hood system runs. This is when the rector has strayed far from Old Testament and New Testament, and into things like electronics and HVAC. The hood is currently at a distance from the stove that would be required to be at a certain grade level, so that the airflow is in a certain way easier. Don, who's an engineer, could probably explain this better, but suffice to say, we would have to run that whole hood ducting through a different spot in the building to get it to code. It's currently just too long of a distance and not at the right grade. Yeah, Bill, and then, yeah.
When we read about this, we were just really amazed because one of our main concerns was the kitchen, of course. And when the feasibility study came back, it was going to be 7 million, and then no, it's not. We can't. That's not feasible. The 3 million is feasible, but there was also a fairly strong body of opinion, at least what I read, as far as what the congregation was coming back saying, we want a quote real kitchen. We want to be able to cook. We want to be able to feed people here, possibly.
Right.
We want a real kitchen. And what I hear coming back is, we're not going to have a real kitchen. And not a real kitchen means you have a stove where you could cook. And every Episcopal church that I've been in around here has a real kitchen. Some of them have been updated, but for code, some of them are old, but they all have a real kitchen. And for me, it's just boggles the imagination that we're going through this huge process. I mean, this is a huge process for everything we're doing. And we end up with what is, to me, half a kitchen. And it flies in the face, it seems to me, of the response you got to the initial feasibility study. And to me, it's a sort of a mealy-mouthed answer. Forgive me for being a little annoyed about this. A mealy-mouthed answer to that request. And I'm just, we're both very disappointed in that.
I hear that disappointment. I hear it. Thank you for sharing it so openly. I appreciate us being able to share that together. Let me be really not mealy mouthed. Let me be very clear. The feedback of the congregation was unequivocal in the feasibility study that we wanted to serve our community. That was the top of that prior and our existing programs, more so than a kitchen. There was strong desire. You're not wrong in reading through the comments section that the comments we received were strong for a full use kitchen, even though those were mixed comments. There was a majority, you're not wrong, of the comments that were provided were positive about a full use kitchen. Please hear very clearly, we're improving what is a health and safety risk currently, and we are providing for the existing use of the kitchen as it is currently being used, but upgraded to a much better, much healthier, and much safer kitchen. So there is no half kitchen. It is going to be fully useful to what we have desired to use it for and what we are using it for currently. There may be some, I shouldn't desire for maybe is too strong. I know there are some dreams and hopes and projects where we would love to see it a professional grade. But the reality is that in my 15 years as your rector, I have not once had an outside group come towards us to say, I'd like to use your kitchen for something. Not once. No ministry, no outside group to cook a meal. Not once. I have had a few parishioners, and most recently since the pandemic, the Thanksgiving dinner is the biggest example I can think of. But I have daily received requests from our neighbors, please, can we have space? Please, can we have room? So we're not ignoring the needs of the congregation. We're going to supply the need of this congregation, but we're also going to be able to feed and supply the need of our neighbors, a very clear and articulate need. We're doing both. We actually get to accomplish a wonderful goal here.
Jared,
Yeah.
can I just add, in this very room, I expressed exactly your same opinion. It's like, what the hell? We're spending all this money and we lose the stove, the freaking stove. And it took me an awful long time. That meeting took hours
It did.
because we kept running back again and again. This is what you can do with the money you have. And I keep thinking, oh dear God, can't we get someone to ante up 200,000? Then we can have a stove. Because I think that HVAC thing is really gonna be
Yeah.
expensive.
Yeah.
Well, you know, we finally had to come to, this is what we can do. And truth to tell, since Peggy Lemon died, if anyone here that remembers when we served beef tenderloin, Peggy Lemon,
Yeah.
I mean, that's the last time I remember really cooking in the kitchen.
Because it
And-
wasn't cookable.
The stove actually.
The
used to
stove
work
actually
better.
works. It's just not a healthy work. But it is useful. It is usable as it currently stands. Yeah, Jan.
Well, there are two words that are important to me, and one is community,
Mm-hmm.
and the other one is the use of the word lounge. Somehow that, I wonder how the space that's being renovated and prepared for more people to be able to be someplace. How is that going to be outfitted? Is there going to be meeting space with a conference room and people are learning and needing that? Or is it a place to relax, kick back and have a cup of coffee? Just let me say, and it's piggybacking on what Phyllis said, but we both have been in a lot of Episcopal
Yeah.
churches. And it's not unusual for people to want to have an event like a wedding or to, for me particularly, because my experience goes back to the early eighties when my daughter and I went and fed loaves and fishes at St. Stephen's Church.
Yeah,
We've both done that in other churches.
Yeah.
And like, preparing for, even feed my starving children, we did that at St. Clements. It's not exactly the same. But we had several wedding receptions. I remember one in particular that was really elaborate, and even Jen Allred and her husband had a very festive event. So I also remember being here for Hmong New Year, and they were cooking, but they were also bringing their wonderful egg rolls. Yeah, and I know that's possible, but when I think about community, I think about food insecurity.
Yeah.
I think about the number of people who are standing out in line waiting to come in. They're freezing cold and they need food, and the food has been prepared. We had Erich Christ at Black Forest cooked everything for St. Stephen's, and he's still working. And other kitchens that are just absolutely gorgeous and outfitted for and the preparation of food. I have a hard time frankly believing that nobody says we'd love to have our wedding here, we'd also like to have a reception.
don't hear me saying that. We've just done a reception here. It was just that the food was catered outside and brought in and then
Yeah.
prepped in the space. And so that is the majority. We will still have abundant food in this kitchen. We will still have meals served out of this kitchen. It will still be a very useful kitchen at the level it's been used at currently. It is just that we are not replacing the sort of professional stove and that setup. A good example, if you want to see a catering kitchen, would be to go to our friends at St. Thomas More, a church probably double the size of St. John's in terms of attendance. They're down on the corner of Lexington and Summit. They just, this 2 years ago, replaced their full professional kitchen with a catering kitchen. They kept the same real estate and footprint, and they put in warming ovens, dishwasher, and the ability to do essentially what we're doing. They still will serve their fish fry at St. Thomas More. They will still do all of the fellowship and hospitality out of this, what is a world-class church with a large and hospitable congregation. They'll just do it out of a catering kitchen, and then things like frying will happen under tents outdoors, keeping the smell of oil out of the church building. So there are ways to do what we want to do without it being impoverishing. And I understand the strong pushback that you're experiencing in your household. I really appreciate you articulating it. I do think that what we will get, and this is not just me, I'm the mouthpiece today, but this is the work of a whole committee of folks, and pass through the conversation at vestry as well. A shared belief that the best use of our dollars here is to build something that will benefit our neighbors and our programs.
I would say I understand what you're saying, and I hear, Bob, what you said. So it would have really helped if you had explained this more concretely in the materials that we recently received, because it sounded like we were going back to the original deal without any feedback of the, excuse me, of the, that came back from the feasibility study.
Sure.
I hear what you're saying.
Thank you.
I'm not happy about it, but I understand, why you've come to this decision.
Thank you. Yeah, that's why we're doing these forums. There will also be town halls scheduled after the November 9th kickoff for different groups of people, and they're open to anyone. So there's like 6 or 7, anyone from congregational gifts here, but there are multiple events where we'll go through this again. So the idea is that a case statement can't say everything, it can say some things, and we want to provide spaces where we talk about it, share more, have dialogue, because we're trying to be as transparent as possible and make sure that we talk about these things if there are concerns. I do want to make sure, because again, I'm preaching. Is there any other questions that we can tackle? I knew the kitchen would be a big one, so I want to make sure if we need to stick with it. Yeah, Rick.
You used a phrase a moment ago, best use of the money. The feasibility study said we could raise X. The vestry and the capital campaign committee figured out what could we do with X dollars. And the extra cost of the kitchen would prevent us from doing something else if we did that. But my question is, am I correct that you said we could always upgrade to a full kitchen in the future
Yeah.
if the money was available?
Yeah.
We haven't precluded that.
No, there's no, one of the things that was in the feasibility study that we really did pay attention to is please don't make choices today that affect potentials tomorrow. So the other options for a cooking kitchen that we looked at were a reduced footprint so that we would have lower costs for overall surfaces, floors, things like that. But even those excluded then because of the cost, other projects. There was no matrix in which we could do a cooking kitchen of any size and do these other projects fully. And so then we heard again, oh, right, people don't want to hem us in. That smaller footprint would also hem us in. That would be a bigger cost to expand the kitchen if we ever decided we needed to. So we decided to keep the footprint and hold the possibility of a professional or even just a regular cooking kitchen in the future as downstream possibility. And I'm here to tell you, if somebody comes in above the $3 million mark beyond the $200,000 stretch goal, which we've set, the stretch goal has a purpose for it. But if we raise another $200,000, I think that loud and clear to the congregation, the first priority is going to be, let's do that kitchen. And so that, that's St. John's has never been one to always surprises in generosity. So we just wanted to be careful in setting our goal as achievable. I'll be really delighted if we can do the kitchen still. We're not like against kitchens from the word. I love to cook. The thing I wanted most was this kitchen, but it's not the Jared show. I think Lynn Hertz, who's also on the fellowship committee and on the capital campaign committee and a former senior warden, said it best. She said, I want the kitchen, but this isn't the Church of Lynn. And I think that's important, that each of us have our own little thing that we want to see. And what I'm here to say is, I hope that as we see the whole, we see that value that we really want to see in St. John's, which is serving our neighbors, serving each other, and that we don't let the things that we're frustrated about to keep us from the generosity that will help this happen, that we will still see. I say this every year when I pay my taxes. I don't like everything my taxes go to, but I know that I'm a part of a collective, and that part of losing that decision making about narrow things means that I give it to the whole. These are not taxes; no one is obligated to pay them. But I think that principle still stands, that we would be generous to the whole for the sake of the whole. Any
Are
other
there lots
questions?
of new spaces that are going to be furnished?
Yeah, everything will be furnished. The fireside
So
room.
what's the cost of all the I asked the question about lounge and I just have a thing about it because I know where I go, the places are called lounges. And
Yeah. So
it's not church.
one thing to name is that at this stage of the design, we didn't get into the granular of like what kind, like, is it going to be mid-century furniture? Or is it going to be, traditional? Will the carpet be blue or will the carpet be red? What grade of expense are we spending? Because those things, we've got a range budgeted for like essentially the furnishings, and it will be for the whole. So it will be the fireside room, the 2 new lounges. That's budgeted in there as a part of a contingency cost. So at this point, we've not made those decisions. Those will come in later design, and those will be communicated with feedback required from the congregation as we do that. So I can't answer specifically like how many chairs, but yeah, it will be a thoughtful process.
Good vision of it.
Yeah.
I'd also suggest that you ask for donations if you have any interest in that, because there are several of us who have lots of furniture that needs to go somewhere.
Behold, Jen, behold the church. For lo, it is furnished by donations.
Well, hand-me-downs, but that kind of trivializes what our mothers have left and so on, but nice
Yeah,
tables.
this
Chairs.
this room was last refinished in 2011, 2012, right after I got here with a donation And so the carpet at the time was new and not stained, and these couches had been mid-century fabrics, and then they were refinished. And there was new lamps purchased, which you see, kind of trying to blend the modern and the traditional. So it's been a while, but it'll get another update, much needed update when we do the renovations. Are there no other questions?
I just have a quick one.
Yes,
We keeping water access in the new space?
the new kitchen.
No, not the new kitchen, the lounge. Because we're eliminating a wall where
Yeah.
we have plumbed in water for coffee.
For coffee.
So will there be water access?
My understanding is yes. I don't see it listed. Again, they didn't put in the schematics for electric and water on the blueprints, but they're aware that that's brand new. And because they're taking the wall out, they're eliminating that essentially. So those tie-offs will have to come to the central wall, I think is
So
my,
that's where the coffee's gonna be.
that's my understanding. Yeah. I've recently given up most of the coffee intake in my life, and yet I still worship at the altar at good coffee. And I can't imagine a church, much like you can't imagine one without a professional kitchen, I can't imagine one without quality coffee, so, man.
I'm wondering about the reception area because a number of people after a funeral will come back here for reception. And then, so there's this pile up of coats and things like that, and where do you put them?
For
And then
this room.
how do you accommodate the long lines of people? Is there some way to make that a little easier?
Are you talking about this room, or are you talking about the
Well, I'm talking
the
about
parish hall?
just the process, this room. Yeah, I'm
You're
talking
talking about
about
up
this
here.
room
Yeah.
and that hallway. Where there's usually a long line of
Yeah.
people, and then where do you put your coats? We have some couches out there, but.
I'll
there
be
aren't
really,
any Closets or, I don't know.
I'll be really honest, Nan, that is not something that was considered in this particular project. It was in the $6.7 million projects, it was considered, and it was one of the things that unfortunately had to kind of
Okay.
get deprioritized as top priority. But I know that in the overall plan, that plan still is a hope, an aspiration, essentially, that would create a new welcome center that's a little more obvious for when you come and go, that would include space up here that's a little more obvious, and potentially, hopefully, eventually, new projects that might bud out into the gym, creating kind of a gallery space overlooking the parish hall. That would alleviate some of the things you're talking about, but they're just not in this
Okay,
project, sadly. We'll continue to make do.
all right.
It's like any home improvement. It's sort of the things you wanted and the things that you're excited about, and the things like the boiler that have to get done. So,
Thank you.
Thank you, Jared.
no, thank you all. Thank you for your good questions, and thank you, applicant and committee.